Hello, seventh graders, and welcome back. My name is Miss Hudson. I'm your virtual teacher, and I'm really glad you've joined again as we begin week 5. We're at the midpoint of this entire unit of study, and I'm very excited to begin lesson 20 with you now. As we go, we like to reflect on our guiding questions, and the two that we hold consistent every day for this entire experience are: how is the adolescent brain changing? And number 2, how can I make an informed decision about an issue like screen time and then effectively argue my position? So this week, we'll be reading a new piece of text. We will be gathering evidence and strengthening our thinking around these guiding questions as we dive into the work. So the materials that you will need today will bring you back to your distance learning packet. So you'll need to locate that and turn to the article for week 5 that is titled How Curiosity Stimulates the Brain to Improve Learning and Memory. It's a mouthful. It's a big, long title. So find the article along with lesson 20 and your lesson 20 note catcher. You'll need a pencil. Go ahead and pause the video. Make sure you have all the materials on your screen, and then come back and push play, and we'll get started. Okay, like always, we always begin with our learning targets. We have 2 today. The first one has to do with I can determine the gist of a section of text and write what it is mostly about. And the second learning target says, I can use a variety of strategies to determine the meaning of unknown words or phrases. Now, we've done this second learning target many times, and I always encourage you to never just read right past words that you do not know. And our article this week is really going to hit home with that. You got to stay curious. You need to be interested in the things that you're reading for your own pleasure or as assigned. We get a lot more out of things if we stay curious. I do want to turn our attention a little more deeply around the learning target number 1. I can determine the gist of a section of text and write what it is mostly about. There is an important difference between the gist and the main idea. And often in school, you're in 7th grade, you've been in school long enough, you've heard a lot about the main idea, and with our curriculum, you also hear a little bit about the gist, and they really are not the same thing. So I want to be very specific that this gist is from a section of text. We'll get more deeply into that as we go today, and that you're only going to write down what you think it's mostly about. It's kind of a guess after reading that it's mostly about something, and we're going to practice that skill today as one of our learning targets with our new reading. All right, so it's time to dig into that. And you know, on the day 1 of any week, I will do the read aloud with you. And you've heard me say many times at this point that I would want your eyes on the text. So I will be reading aloud the text. If that actually is something that you don't want, you can just wait for me to be done and just advance the video. But most people can benefit from both seeing the text and hearing the text. Any age, any stage, most people don't mind being read to if it's for their learning or their benefit and their interest. So this article is titled How Curiosity Stimulates the Brain to Improve Learning and Memory. So I have my copy in my hands. You should have your copy in your hands. and I'm wearing my glasses so that I can actually read it. So I want to draw attention to the young girl and her photo that's on the front page, because they're actually kicking into that photo and that reflection immediately in the article, and it's a little confusing. So just look at the picture, see the girl peeking in the window, and see her reflection, because that's what they're going to open with. Okay, so here we go. How curiosity stimulates the brain to improve learning and memory. Do we live in a holographic universe? How green is your coffee? Could drinking water, too much water, actually kill you? Before you look up the answers on Google, you might consider how your knowledge-hungry brain is preparing for the answers. A 2014 study from the University of California, Davis, suggests that when we feel curious, changes in the brain ready us to learn about the subject at hand. Not only that, but the brain also prepares to absorb separate, unrelated information. The research team, which included neuroscientist Charan Rangalath, asked 19 participants to review more than 100 questions. The participants rated each question in terms of how curious they were about the answer. Next, each subject revisited 112 of the questions, half of which they found interesting, whereas the rest they found uninteresting, while the researchers scanned their brain activity. And I just want to pause there and remember that earlier in our readings, we remember how they used to scan the brain during tests like this. And I bet you remember some of that too. It's called an MRI. And so I just wanted to pause there and connect us back, because they don't tell us that in this article, but you've already learned it. All right, I'm going to pick up. There's a heading at the bottom of page 1. It says piquing curiosity. And that word piquing, it's a very unusual word. Sometimes we know the word to hear it, but to see it, that is spelled very differently than I thought. So moving on with the reading, piquing curiosity. During the scanning session, participants viewed a question, waited 14 seconds, and then viewed a photograph of a face totally unrelated to that question. They were then shown the answer. The researchers tested participants to see how well they could recall and retain both the trivia answers and the faces they had seen. The researchers discovered that greater interest in a question led not only better memory for the answer, but also for the unrelated face that had come before it. A follow-up test 1 day later found the same results. People could better remember a face if it came after an intriguing question. Somehow, curiosity could prepare the brain for learning and long-term memory more broadly. The findings are somewhat similar to the work at UC Irvine neuroscientist James McGraw. He found that emotional arousal could improve certain memories, but Rangaranth and his team revealed curiosity involves very different parts of the brain. Scanning brain activity. To understand exactly what happens in the brain, the researchers turned to the brain scans. They discovered that brain activity during the waiting period before an answer appeared was linked to better memory. Several changes occurred during this waiting period. First, brain activity ramps up in two regions in the middle of the brain. These regions transmit a chemical called dopamine, which helps regulate the sensation of pleasure and reward. This suggests that before the answer appears, the brain's eager interest already engages the reward system. This anticipation was really important, said Rangrath, co-author, UC Davis neuroscientist Matthias Gruber. The more curious a subject was, the more this part of their brain expected something good. In addition, the researchers found that curious minds showed increased activity in the part of the brain called the hippocampus, which is involved in the creation of memories. In fact, seeing how much the hippocampus and reward pathways interacted helped predict someone's ability to remember the faces. The brain's reward system seemed to prepare the hippocampus for learning. These findings tell us many things. For one, Rangrath suspected the findings could help explain memory and learning difficulty in people with conditions that involve low dopamine. Just a quick pause here to say we've already read a lot about the hippocampus. In previous readings, we know that the hippocampus part of the brain is centered around memory, and that's the part of the muscle of the brain we want to keep active through exercise because it will help us retain our memories longer into our lifetime. So we've read a little bit about the hippocampus before, but dopamine is a new introduction of idea. So that's a vocabulary word for most of us, I think. Okay, hungry for knowledge. Encouraging curiosity could also help educators, advertisers, and storytellers find ways to help students or audiences better remember their passages. This research advances our understanding of the brain structures that are involved in learning processes, said Goldsmiths University of London psychologist Sophie von Stroom. She is unconnected to the study. Von Stroom hopes other researchers will do similar research to clarify the kinds of information curious people can retain. She also wants to know whether results differ for subjects who are generally curious as opposed to temporarily interested in something specific. Rangrath's findings also hint at the nature of curiosity itself. Neuroscientist Mariki Jepma at the University of Colorado, Boulder, also did not participate in this study. However, she had previously found that curiosity can be an unpleasant experience, and the brain's reward circuitry might not kick in until there is a resolution. She suspected that her findings and Rangrath's results were two sides of the same coin. To explain this, she referred to the experience of reading a mystery book. Being uncertain about the identity of the murderer may be an unpleasant reward anticipating feeling when you know this will be revealed, she said. But this will turn into frustration if the last chapter is missing. Rangrath agreed that the hunger for knowledge is not always an enjoyable experience. It's like an itch that you have to scratch, he said. It's not really pleasant. So that's our whole article this week, and it really is focused around curiosity. And how does that affect our memory for what we are learning? So staying curious will be an important thing moving forward. I'd like you to think about a couple of things as we move the lesson forward. Remember to think about what is this article mostly about, and how does being curious help you learn new things? So keeping that in mind, I'd like you to pause the video and go have a quick conversation with a family member or a caregiver or a friend about the questions on this slide. How does curiosity help you stay interested in new ideas? And what kinds of things are you curious about? Think about how you engage in your learning at school and how being interested could help you be successful. So pause the video, take about 5 minutes, and go have that conversation and come on back before we start our writing portion. All right, thank you very much. So all of this, we did the reading, thinking, talking. We're getting set up now for the writing portion of our day. Using the Lesson 20 note catcher, I'm going to have you write the gist of each section of the article, beginning with the introduction and then following the other 3 sections. So you're going to reread the article in sections and then just write a gist on your note catcher. Also, as you read, be looking at the second part of your note catcher, because I did indicate in the reading like the word peaking, which is the very bottom of page 1. Also, I mentioned dopamine, the hippocampus, and the circuitry is the final word on your list today. And these are going to be in your article throughout the reading, okay? So for example, I want to be really specific about where the introduction of the article is, okay? So the introduction that you're going to need to write a gist for is everything below the picture, all the way down to that first heading at the bottom of page 1. It's kind of an introduction, okay? And it can be kind of confusing the way they started with these 3 questions. They're really just getting you to be curious because they're trying to make a point there. So you can write the gist there, and then your second portion is titled at the very bottom of page 1. It's a little confusing, but that section, Piquing Curiosity, is the first 3 paragraphs on page 2. So read those 3 paragraphs and then just write the gist statement. What is that mostly about? Do the same thing for the other 2 sections in the article, Scanning Brain Activity and Hungry for Knowledge. Then turn your attention as you read to your 4 words this week. All of this will help you as we dive more deeply in lessons 21, 22, and 24. Okay? So please pause your video, grab your materials, and spend the next 20 minutes reading sections, writing your 4 gist statements, and your 4 vocabulary words. Okay? I'll meet you back here to close out today's lesson. All right, thank you so much and welcome back. So this is a little bit heavier because you have to trust yourself that you do know, not the main idea, but really the gist. What are they telling me about piquing curiosity? And a lot of this article is about researchers and what they found. Try to stay like in their messaging when you're doing a gist statement. It's just really one sentence or an idea. What is it mostly about? So those first 4 pieces of your lesson 20 note catcher are really just those gist statements, and then you could define those 4 words in your own words, or you could use a strategy like a context clue, because some of them actually are answered like in the reading. But you could also use your dictionary or Google or, something at the house. So see what you can do with that. And I appreciate all your effort. You should really take some time to reflect on the idea of being curious. And, you know, we were naturally born curious. 2-year-olds and little, if you have little brothers and sisters or anybody around, you know, they want to know, what's this? You know, what's this? They want to know everything. What is this? And they'll ask the same question 100 times and it's still the same answer. It's a bottle of water, you know. And those are really tedious questions, but they're naturally curious. Children are naturally curious. What is it? At age 3, they really start turning the question around a little more deeply, and then they want to know why. Why does the sun rise? Why does the sun set? But they're still curious. So our older siblings or our older selves, and you're in 7th grade, sometimes we get concerned that you're just not as curious as you were when you were young. You've learned a lot, there's no doubt. But there's so much more to learn and to know. And staying curious is a way that we can prolong our memory and our ability to learn things. So being curious helps us. I am a person who might not have been as talented in math as I was in some other things, like maybe social studies, because I found social studies interesting. I didn't find math as interesting. And so now I know I can push myself to do things that I might not be interested in doing, but need to do and should do. And if I shift my mindset to one of a more curious idea, I might be able to benefit and learn more. So that's what we're going to be working on this week. Stay curious. And don't forget to read for 20 more minutes for your own pleasure, something you want to read. We've got to change that habit along the lines of curiosity and just reading for our own pleasure. Our fluency practice runs the same way every week. If you would please get a timer and read the passage we've been working with today for 1 minute and then mark it off where 60 seconds is done. That's where you stopped. Count up how many words that was, and we'll see if you're more fluent with that reading by the end of the week. It is a great way to understand reading more fluently and comprehensively. All right. So thanks for being with me today. I'll see you again tomorrow. Make it a great day.